I left the city, I've been browsing. Treading water that they drowning. My head on a swivel, yeah. It's only real in my surroundings.
Hello and welcome to episode 93 of the Smash Accept podcast. I'm your host, Michael Royer. You can find me on Twitter at Dynasty_DadFF. And again, there's excitement in the air. I mean, we got Scott Fishbowl we're going to be talking about today. Super exciting content. We're going to be giving away one of our draft boards. Guys, John, Adam are on the show tonight. How you guys doing?
Excited. It's Scott Fishbowl time of year. Happy to be on the pod.
I know. And Adam, I mean, this is your first time on Scott Fishbowl. Talk to me a little bit about the experience. You got the email, like some of the thoughts going through your head and how that whole thing shook out. You know, I remember my first one, and it was just like I could still remember getting that email and just sharing it with my buddies.
Oh, yeah. No, it was first and foremost, I was in Vegas on top of it. So I was in Vegas, get the email when I woke up in the morning. I'm like, I text you and John. I'm like, dude, this is awesome. So fantastic. Yeah, I felt like I was already in the fun, really fun place, but I felt like it was Christmas morning. I'm like, I got in. So yeah, it's been 3 years in the making and totally stoked. It was
That's awesome.
Better than Christmas morning.
Who's the big winner tonight in the casino? Huh?
Well, we're gonna find out here with the spin, right? I mean, John, the Patreon chat has been blowing up, and it's been a long time in the making. But the Smash Accept family just keeps growing and growing every single day.
Yeah, I'm loving this time of year. I guess we've been talking about in the pod, but I really feel like I've never had this much fun in an off season with Scott Fishbowl, SFB12, the Smash Patreon, a lot of the stuff that we've been working on with the Smash crew is kind of coming to life. Dad, your vision that you've had for how we build out this community, it's so much fun to watch it happen. And yeah, it's kind of taken almost a life of its own. So it's been real fun for me to be a part of it.
That's awesome. And I got to point out, I was on first with my backwards black hat today. You're kind of copying that a little bit. But guys, I mean, what we're going to do here is our sponsor, awesome group at draftkits.co. You got to go on their website. You got to order their boards. I got my Patrick Mahomes board behind me. I use it every single year. I'm going to unveil my kids' board. John's got his behind him. But they make the best custom draft boards. They make everything from your basic, $24 medium size with high graphics to the most elaborate, like beautiful vinyl custom boards. And what we're going to do today is, right off the bat, we're going to give away one of these boards. They have $115 value. Everyone that is in the paid Patreon program is on this list. And what we're going to do is we're just going to spin the wheel. I got everybody's name in there. Some of these guys in this Patreon chat are in our Scott Fish mock that we're going to be going over here very shortly. So those guys got 2 entries, and it's nice. Exciting. I mean, someone's going to get a $115 board, whatever team they want, and whatever player they want in the background. It's just going to be fire. So guys, go over to draftkits.co, put in code SMASH, you get 10% off.
Do it.
Honestly, you will be the coolest commish out there. So without further ado, I'm going to spin the wheel, and we're going to see who wins, man. I'm excited.
I'm kind of nervous here.
Look at that wheel. Great. Let's get it going.
We live.
The odds be in your favor.
Who's it going to be? Elise Hardy. Oh, Brian's going to lose it. He was like so close. All right, congratulations. That is awesome.
Nice.
So congrats. I will talk to you. We'll get you your custom board here in a little bit. But guys, I mean, tonight's podcast, I'm super excited about because we are going to talk Scott Fishbowl. That's what everything's going on right now. Everybody's talking about it. You got the T-shirts. You got all the cool things in the environment. John, I mean, I remember my first Scott Fishbowl. Yeah. It was so much excitement. It was like a blur, and I think there's a lot of things. Mm-hmm. This is my 4th one, and I'm relaxed now. I'm in here. I'm like, I'm in the 108 chat, and I'm making friends in there, and I'm networking. And then I'm in the Philadelphia chat because that's where, I was going to be Team Endor or somewhere from Star Wars. But, I went with Philadelphia, which is close to me. And I'm talking to those guys, and I'm networking. And it's just like, it's an awesome experience just to know you're in it and you're having that fun. We're all raising money for charity. We got the AVI makers and making banners. And Twitter's just, everything's SFB12, and I'm excited about it. Talk to me a little bit how you've evolved over the years with that, because that first year, it's just a blur sometimes.
Yeah, and you almost put a little bit of pressure because you like want to prove yourself out to the community. And I kind of went so hard looking for ceiling players, a lot of which didn't come through, and I learned a ton. But I love Scott Fishbowl. I really think it is the single best thing that brings the whole fantasy dynasty community together every year. I'm repping Austin. I'm in the Austin division, and the Dirty Dozen. And I want to give a quick shout out to the 12s chat. Nick Pinikoff kind of got that going. A lot of them are. I told them about the pod. They're kind of listening in, and they're mixing it up. They checked out our mock. But that's the first thing that I'm going to tell everybody here is really enjoy it, have fun, and get involved in the community. Don't miss out on that because you're really competing and you've done 100 different mocks. We're going to get to that, but I think that's really, really key. And when you're in there too on the day of, man, keep in touch with everybody, have fun with it. One thing that I thought was really cool that I didn't know about my first year is you can actually keep track of the live ADP from all the other Scott Fishbowl divisions that are drafting, and it'll kind of give you a sense for who's going where, kind of size it up. I definitely would advise everybody too, like you want to go in with a plan, but I was a little bit too rigid with my plan, Dad, and you really do need to stay pretty flexible and kind of get an early read on where there's going to be value, kind of projecting out who might be available. Make sure you understand these scoring settings too. And Dad, I was in a couple of these mocks and I realized, I'm like, oh, that's right. You have to start 3 wide receivers. And you got these QB.
You and I were talking about that on the phone.
Yeah, like I almost missed it. And we've done this before. So really make sure that you study up and you have like a custom kind of idea on the projections. We're going to get into that a little bit. And lastly, do some mocks. Not necessarily to predict what's going to happen, because I can guarantee you when it's live, it's a real thing. It's not going to go like you expect, but it is going to give you an idea of the strategy that you might want to take and where some guys might be. And so that's what we're here to do tonight, is actually help you with our mock. And this is actually going to help a ton of people, I think, that are in the Scott Fishbowl 12 this year.
Yeah, and for we have a lot of listeners who don't even know what Scott Fishbowl is. They're like, "What is this?" And it's the premier pro-am tournament in fantasy football. Really it's the kickoff of the fantasy football season, and they're like, "Well, who's in it? Is it just analysts?" I mean, it's analysts, it's fans, there's celebrities, there's professional athletes. I mean, there are hundreds and hundreds of fans in this year. It's an awesome part for your community and raising money for worthwhile causes.
Fantasy Cares, check that out.
Yeah, they have raised hundreds of thousands of dollars for charity.
It's amazing.
And it's just like every year, this is what gets it kicked off, right? Like this is when we know fantasy football is right around the corner, So I am super excited about it. Let's talk a little bit about the scoring here, because that's the crazy thing. Scott Fishbowl scoring, and I'm seeing it in a lot of like regular leagues now. But Scott, I think, was one of the first ones where I seen scoring was in the 1.75 tight end premium. But basically the way it looks out, and one of the trickiest things is you got 11 starters, So we're in a deep league with. A lot of guys in our group chat that did this, they were like, yo, that was really difficult. The fact that we had 11 starters. You could start 1 quarterback, 1 super flex. You have to start 3 wide receivers. You have to start 2 running backs. You can start a kicker. You have to start 1 tight end, and it's just like, the scoring for this is what's bananas. Like you look at things, and last year the scoring was ridiculous. So you got to at least pay attention to what some of those things are. Where there's points for first downs. Adam, what's the biggest thing when you were going across the scoring that stuck out to you?
Yeah, the first downs was a big change, right? So it's definitely propping up your possession receivers and obviously your possession big time, not only your big time tight ends, but also your middle tier tight ends that tend to be the go-to. So, John, for example, stole, Schultz there in the middle rounds we'll get to, but guys like that, right? The guys that have that upside, but are going to be your go-to receivers in those 2 positions, I think was huge. And, really still considering the tight end premium, but that's kind of from year to year. But I think that was, for me, was the biggest one where I think not everybody's looking at, whether if it's our mock or other mocks I've been doing so far, is that first down and really making sure that you're prioritizing those possession receivers.
Yeah, and I love that. And there's so many different philosophies to go in with it and things like that. But I mean, we're looking at an 11-week regular season, and that's where, like I said, this will be my fourth time in. I've made the playoffs every time, but then it gets crazy, right? And John, you pointed out this year, you used to be head to head, but this year it is a median scoring.
That's
so
right.
The top 6 in each division get a win, the bottom 6 in each division get a loss when it comes to points. So I think that's going to change how we look at things, where you got to go with your scoring. And then once you make the playoffs, then it's a crapshoot. It gets crazy. Like I went all the way to the final 12, but it's like each team, your bottom 10% of your starting field will be eliminated, and then you move on to the next field. Then you move on. So it's like you got to have a philosophy of drafting for high upside. You got to take those guys that are going to give you big risk rewards for some time. And the bottom line that I got to say to everybody is, like, my first year, I was so excited to be in there. I didn't do a ton of prep. I listened to a couple pods here and there. I wasn't rigid. I just went with the flow and had fun. In the last couple of years, I've tried to study up, and tried to do all this extra research. Enjoy the event. I want you guys to listen to podcasts and what they have to do, but just enjoy the event. Enjoy the experience, because there's going to be over 2,000 people, only going to be one winner. And it's a eternal glory for anybody that does. You get to hoist the belt from Trophy Smack. Speaking of Trophy Smack, again, draftkits.co now. Awesome, John. They are going to be the official draft board.
I heard about
of Scott Fishbowl. So 11 of the 12 live events are going to have our sponsor, draftkits.co, and some of those sweet graphics that we were talking about. So, that part is super exciting to me.
Yeah, and I think they're actually going to stream some of these live. The live events I think you can actually be able to watch some of these go down. And so check that out too. We'll try to make sure that we drop it into our feed when some of these live Scott Fishbowl drafts kick off with the DraftCo draft boards.
Exactly. So what I wanted to talk about here first is our boy over at JWB Fantasy. That's at WyattB_FF. He's at all things fantasy. He's a chef. He's a nerd. He's creator of at JWB Fantasy Football. Does things over at DLF. He's been in the Scott Fishbowl 11 and 12, and he comes up with just an awesome tool, like totally awesome. It's at jwfantasyfootball.wp.com, and they have an awesome projection model. Like, he has it out there, not only his redraft, his dynasty, but he's got his Scott Fishbowl scoring projection model. And as I was looking through this and I was doing my draft, I was taking the best player available based off of those projections. It's like, those kind of projections aren't out there on Fantasy Pros. They're not out there on Yahoo, ESPN. Right. This is one of the coolest tools for your draft. You guys got to check that out. You got to give him a follow.
Yeah, I was impressed. It's good stuff.
It is awesome. And again, that's at WyattB_FF. Guys, go over and follow him. Send him a DM. It is a super cool tool that, we did our mock. And then, John, I know you put in the numbers here.
Right.
Talk to me a little bit about what you saw from the numbers. And, of course, out of our mock, I got to give shout out to our guys who ended up drafting there. We had Adam at the 1 spot. Our 2nd spot was our man, Brian Russell. Cousin Vito, was at 3. Jared Selbrady at 4. We had Sam Eichenlob at 5. Our boy Pope FFH at 6. Michael McDade at 7. I picked from the 8 spot. Fantasy Nerd Boy, these guys are super sharp. Dan Duke FFB. And that's Dan Breitweiser. And then you at 12. This was one of the toughest drafts. I've drafted industry drafts. I've drafted with some absolute ballers.
No doubt.
And this was one of the best drafts I've ever been a part of. Just super sharp guys. I know some of those guys, Adam and I were talking, were like, they were sniping all my guys on purpose just to kind of tick off Dad. But, John, talk to me a little bit what about you saw from the scoring. And then, of course, whose team graded out the highest.
Yeah, we'll get to that. But, yeah, I definitely think it's important to have like a set of projections that you kind of believe on. And so we use this one from JWB, and it's really helpful, right? Because Scott keeps everybody on their toes. He's not going to go with your cookie cutter type of scoring. And so you mentioned the first downs, Adam. I also would throw in there like this QB completion percentage accuracy is going to be a big deal. I wanted to see how that played out into some projections with that league median too. Dad, I think that's really going to be important with QBs, and we'll get to that. To stay in that top half, you're going to need some QBs who tend to score the most points that are above the average if you want to beat that median every week. And so I think that was one key takeaway. But these mocks really help you determine like what strategy do you want to take. And this is exactly what we've been talking about in the 12s chat. So by entering in all the projections for our draft, we kind of got a sense for which teams really were projected to do the best. All these different kind of strategies from the Smash Patreon crew that jumped in here. And we'll give a quick shout out. We had Nerd Boy came in at 4 there. Prestige came in with 3. Yours truly came in 2. I was a little short. Of course, the king here, Dad, did come in number 1. He's got a couple more years of Scott Fishbowl experience under his belt. But this is really key, and we need to break down like what did these teams do here with their builds that led to them actually having the highest point totals. And I think that's what we're gonna start to break down here, Dad.
Yeah, so let's talk about it right off the bat. I mean, Adam, you had the number 1 overall pick. I feel like the number 1 overall pick in this particular format, this will be the same guy in 90%. Talk to me a little bit about why you picked number 1, and I mean, who you're going to take. I mean, I think the who is very obvious, but talk to me about the why.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Josh Allen, spoiler alerts here, right? That's why I said on the chat in the draft too. I'm like, get ready for a curveball, boys. And then I picked Allen. But yeah, it's a no-brainer just because of the upside, the floor, and then with the completions, right? And first, I mean, you're talking about it's the full product, and that's half the reason I did it. I wanted to get the elite of the elite on the top of this board, and then play value. So, and then 2, as you mentioned, this is my first Scott Fishbowl. I just wanted to have fun. I wanted to go get the top player and be able to just have some fun with it. So it's kind of half. Want to get your boy at number 1, and then number 2
I like
was
that.
Just have some fun.
Yeah, and I mean, John, I think you chose 12. I think
Right.
the biggest wrinkle this year is the third round reversal. And
That's
and
right.
that was the biggest struggle. Brian Russell messaged me. He's like, for me, the biggest thing was trying to navigate that third round reversal. I mean, Adam, for you, that had to feel like an eternity getting back to you in the third round where it would have normally been in that area. And John, I mean, I believe that's one of the reasons why you chose 12.
Yeah, it really was. It was a key part of my strategy. I kind of looked into who I thought might be available there at that first turn, the 1-2. But knowing that I'm going to start the third round off with the 3-1, to me was a pretty big advantage. And so I wanted to play that out this year and start at the end. Plus, the other reason I like 12, to tell you guys the truth, is I get to sit back and see what strategies are kind of going down in front of me, both in the first and as it's going back in the second. Again, I start off the third, so I can see the first 2 picks at that point from everybody. I'm the last one to go in round 1, 2, so I can kind of maneuver a little bit and stay fluid like I talked about. And so that's actually an advantage that the 12s I thought had. And it's a few of the reasons that I wanted to choose that one.
And in my particular situation, I chose 8 because, a lot of people are like, hey, I'm playing this area. I'm playing chess here. For me, there's 7 quarterbacks.
And it worked out.
And there are 7 quarterbacks and 1 running back that I want in this area. And that's why I was like, I'll take 8. And then you get that third round reversal. So, that to me, and everybody's already in their draft slot. So let's talk about some of these picks. I mean, pick 1, obviously Josh Allen. Pick 2 to Brian Russell goes to Justin Herbert. Absolutely love that pick. I mean, most of these guys, when you asked what their philosophy was, they said, 1, I want to get that early quarterback for that safe floor and high ceiling. Because completion percentages are huge. Because quarterback scoring, I mean, if you pull up, John, what he has there, I mean, when you go to Wyatt's projections here, what kind of points are we looking at? I mean, we're looking at Josh Allen, 412 fantasy points. Justin Herbert, 395, and then you look at the top running back. The top running back is 366. The top wide receiver projected is all the way down at 358. So it's like those quarterbacks are huge. And I always look at the difference between the top quarterback and then that next tier.
Those tier
you go
breaks.
down to your QB2s, and those guys are in the 200s.
That's right.
Some of these guys, because of the completion percentages, are way down there. Because you get a full point for your completion, -5 for every incompletion. So some of these guys, we had some interesting situations where Zach Wilson was in the negative last year, and you got to really pay attention to those kind of things. So the quarterback scoring,
QBs
huge.
was just gone, right?
Yeah.
We saw in this mock here the first 7
7 picks. I mean, Vito took Patrick Mahomes. He said that was kind of like Adam. That was his most enjoyable pick, right? It was like it was a smash accept. He got to sit back and relax after taking 3, and then it got tricky. Jared took Lamar Jackson. The rushing upside isn't quite as impressive in this format because of the completions, but you still get the points there, and that's something you definitely want to get. I know multiple guys here. Sam Eichenlob ends up taking Kyler Murray, and then he got Trey Lance in the second. He said his biggest play was trying to get 2 mobile quarterbacks and guys that have high completion percentage. And then Pope, he took Joe Burrow. That was his guy all along because completion percentage is king. Joe Burrow was number 1 in completion percentage last year.
That's right.
So that was huge. And then I believe Michael McDade just took Jalen Hurts just to kind of get at me, and try to go in front of me there, which is fine because then at 8, now we start to get a little bit different kind of play. I jumped to the podium to just absolutely hit that smash accept button on Jonathan Taylor because the running backs here, you get the running back, you get the extra points for the first down, the touchdowns. Yes. I mean, Jonathan Taylor is it's him and Christian McCaffrey are right up there, and those are the guys. And Nerd Boy took Christian McCaffrey with the next pick. I think that is a huge play. You want to get those running backs early. You want to get those quarterbacks early. And I feel like we start talking about people's draft philosophies here, and almost every single one of them was like, let's get that early, And for me, John, this is my 4th one. Every single one I've gone in my first 4 picks, I go with 3 running backs and a quarterback,
that's been your
get
formula.
That other one.
Yeah, and I think for those that are listening, this is what I was kind of breaking down with the 12s. I mean, you won the projections here on this mock by doing this, 3 out of your first 4 picks as running backs. And like you said, you're getting some of the top tier guys before you hit that cliff. You can see, looking at these projections, how quickly it tapers off with the premier running backs. There's bell cows that went in the first couple rounds. But so I'm with you. I think QBs and running backs early are key for 2 reasons: the positional scarcity, the point system that Scott Fishbowl has set up this year, and again, just getting into those top scores that you're going to need to win in this league and beat that median every week. So I'm kind of convinced that's the move. One thing I'll just add to this too: if you look back to the scoring, it is half PPR, right? And so who's going to get impacted the most from your standard PPR leagues to now half PPR? It's going to be the wide receivers.
Yeah.
And yeah, it affects everybody, but those are the ones that you depend on receptions, 4 points. And so for those of you that are used to drafting in a PPR environment, I know I am, you do need to adjust a little bit. So it does kind of make sense a little bit to maybe shift back towards the running backs versus the wide receivers here. But
yeah, for sure. And, we end up having the next 2 picks go wide receiver. We just talked about that. But Austin, that's FF_Prestige, super sharp guy, takes Cooper Kupp. You cannot argue with Cooper Kupp.
Yeah, he's truly the exception.
He's the exception. And then Dan Breitweiser went with Jamar Chase. And I think at this point we're trying to get into that area. Now let's talk about what you do here then. I mean, you're in there at the 12. You're in this. Talk to me a little bit about your thought process because the board's wide open here now. You have 7 quarterbacks gone, 2 wide receivers, 2 running backs. What did you ultimately choose to do? And I think this is kind of where this position is going to go completely.
Yeah, I think a lot of the dirty dozen here at the 12 spot will, in this particular scenario, double tap QB.
By the way, I'm very proud that you guys have changed your name from the 12s to the dirty dozen. The 12s was like, come on, it was like kindergarten.
Yeah, we needed a little time, right? We're late in the draft order. We're late on the name, but I'm looking at the board here, and I'm checking back with JWB on his projections here, and he's got Dak Prescott and Tom Brady as looks like the 5th and 6th overall QBs in terms of projections, right? Because you have to factor in the completion percentage, the accuracy there, and so I really just loved starting that direction, knowing that I'm going to get to start the 3rd round here, so there's going to be some pretty juicy like running back options there, potentially see who else might fall. And so that was the philosophy. I also, if JT, CMC, or Kupp had been there, I probably would have gone QB and one of those guys to get one of those absolute premium scoring ceiling plays. But since they were all off the board, to me, that was like the move. And again, I'm taking 2 QB1s off the board, taking them away from the other teams too, and putting myself in a position in this case to score every week above that median with 2 high scoring QBs.
Yeah, and I ran a poll here. I said, for your participating that are in the Scott Fish Bowl for your draft strategy, what are you guys doing? How do you go about that? Do you go QB, QB? 9% said that way. 56.6% said they're taking 2 quarterbacks in the first 3 rounds.
3 rounds. Yeah.
9% just said they want to review it. 24% said wait. Adam, you went with 2. And I feel like that first round, there's like 8 quarterbacks who are just high upside. They're going to dominate. You're playing for a high floor, high ceiling. That second round, I ended up going with Russell Wilson because I think Russell Wilson is going to have a good completion percentage and kind of take off. I would be absolutely thrilled if I could go Taylor Wilson. But you end up getting a guy that I think people are going to sleep on. I think in most standard leagues, he's not there. But Derek Carr in this format is a top 10 quarterback.
Yep. And that's exactly what I went it for, because in a lot of the mocks I'm seeing, a lot of your top, I would say top 5, latter half, like your like John got, right, Henry, Harris, Mixon type of running backs are available there at the end of the second. And I'm generally grabbing them, but I'm always saying, though, if I can get a top 10 because of the completion percentage, you have to remember,
right,
everybody that's listening, you got to remember that makes a huge floor for your Cars, your Cousins of the world, right? Those guys that are borderline QB1, QB2s in standard scoring, but in Scott Fish Bowl, they get elevated, and you'll see there in the projections from the site there that they get elevated. Same reason why Dak's higher, to your point, John, right? So you got to make sure. So my strategy at the end of the 2 is I'm generally going to get a top tier running back, but if I can get a locked in floor with upside QB1, similar to your Brady pick, right? To those type of guys. Brady's not falling to the end of the second, but that tier, it's a smash for me. And then, try to deal with running back in the next 2 rounds.
And I think John and I were talking about it, this year, because it's median format, because, we are going with the top 6, you got to have that high floor quarterbacks. You can't go in and have a week where you wait and you get Daniel Jones and Zach Wilson and they put up duds for you, because that's going to happen on some weeks. There's going to be a high ceiling, high floor for some of those, or low floor for some of those guys. And you see, as you look across the board here, that's a lot of those quarterbacks ended up getting pushed up. And that's where you get into a weird situation, John, is you don't want to be in a situation where Daniel Jones puts up 4 points for you and you're below the median that particular week. Those first 3 rounds, you've got to have the high floor players. I mean, those are the guys where you can't miss. We got to take players that are going to score, but at the same time, they're not going to lose you weeks as well.
Yeah, and you can play around with a couple of these mocks to see kind of when QBs are available. A couple that did fall, and we'll come back to that. Like, I thought you got a steal in the 5th there, Dad. But I really love what you did there, Adam, with getting Carr that early. But some of the guys that did do this mock in the Patreon, they regretted waiting on QB. Superflex is such the norm now that most of the analysts and the fans that are going to be in Scott Fish Bowl are going to be going after those QBs. And so be careful.
Dan's the biggest example there. He got Aaron Rodgers in the 2nd, super high completion percentage, but then he had to wait till Daniel Jones in the 8th round, and it's like, ouch. Man, that's going to have to hit for you. My biggest formula that I've done is I've taken, like, my first year I took Drew Brees early, and then I got Matt Ryan late, like in that 5-6 range. And if you can get that, this particular one, I went with Russell Wilson in the 2nd. And what you said is Tua Tagovailoa is an absolute buy in this format. I mean, he is the QB 14 right there around Jalen Hurts, Matthew Stafford, above Trey Lance, above Justin Fields, because completion percentage is so important. He's going to be a guy that I think is slept on, kind of like Derek Carr. Like, they're guys that you can fall down there. I think Matt Ryan is going to be a guy that's going to be, he went in the 6th round in this one to Jared. Jared took Lamar Jackson in the beginning, and then he was able to, I think there's some guys here that made some good calls. I'm always fade my wide receivers, but Jared ended up going with Diggs and Devontae Adams and Michael Pittman before he gets a quarterback, and that second quarterback. And then at FF Michael 22, he said he was listening to JJ Zacharyson, obviously talking a lot this time of year, where wide receivers don't get hurt as much. So you have a lot of guys. I mean, Michael Beers, the owner over there at RotoViz, he ended up, like, I had him on the pod a couple years ago, and he was talking about, he's going to take a ton of wide receivers early and just load up on those upside running backs, those guys that could pan out. So I think for me, the quarterbacks is I want to get 2 of them in the first 5 for sure. I don't want to go past round 5. Ideally, 2 in the first 4, depending on where you're at. And then late, I mean, who are some late guys here that I thought there was some good values there?
Tannehill. Tannehill went really late, looking the late 7th. I don't think that's actually going to happen in the real deal.
Tannehill went the 7th. Jared
Matt
Goff.
Ryan, Goff.
David Mills.
Yep.
David Mills went in the 10th round. You know, like both of those guys, I think are, every Scott Fishbowl, this is the biggest thing. So like I said, my first year I graded out as like the number 1 draft. But that draft, everything fell to me. You can't, they're all going to be different. Someone's going to take Kyle Pitts at number 1 overall. You know, last year someone took, what was it?
Matt Barkley.
Was it Matt Barkley or Colt
Barkley
McCoy? Number 1 overall as like a charity event, you know, and like those things to me are super cool. You definitely want to do that, you know, and I think Mac Jones is a guy that I think fell pretty late there where, you know, he's going to have a high completion percentage. Jameis Winston went late. I mean, there's some value there. If it hits right for you and you wait on those quarterbacks, good for you. But I feel like if you're in that top 6 picks, you got to get that quarterback. And if you got those other ones in there.
Yeah, one more comment on the QBs for those that are listening, because I know people have asked, like, where did Deshaun Watson go? Right? Because I took him. I took him in like once I had all my starters filled out. I took him in the 13th.
Yeah.
Just in case, you know, this negotiation goes down. We may know more in the next week or 2 weeks or so. But to me, at that point, it's a pure ceiling play. Let's say he comes back for the playoffs. Okay. I'll throw him in my lineup, you know? Yeah. So kind of interesting. I think you might even potentially go later than that. But I thought 13th was about right. So roll the dice there.
Yeah. I mean, and that's definitely a way to go, especially if you got a weaker QB2 and you got to go with a scenario like that. The other thing in the scoring is tight ends are huge.
Yes.
I mean, Travis Kelce is an arguable first-round pick. I think he should go in the first round in almost every single one because it's him and Jonathan Taylor are the 2 highest projected players, and Christian McCaffrey. They're right in there in that. I put another poll up there. I said, hey, what are you guys doing with this? 19% said they're going bully tight end. For you guys that aren't familiar with that is, that's tight end right off the bat. Just bang on that. 45% said wait. That's always my mentality, whether it's dynasty, whether it's redraft, whether it's the Scott Fish. I always wait because I feel like I can hit a guy. 16%, they're just going to play dart throws, you know, and I don't advocate for doing that. No. Adam, talk to me about the tight end that you got since you stole one of my guys. And then, you know, there are some values here. I mean, Travis Kelce, Austin getting Travis Kelce in the 2nd round after getting Cooper Kupp in the 1st is brilliant. You know, this is a position that you have to hit on.
Yeah, so I think how I'm handling wide receivers is similar to tight ends. If you can get your hands on it, good value on your top tier guys, absolutely. So like Prestige doing the Cup, Kelsey, I think that's beautiful at that value in the position of the draft. But once you get past, like, you know, if you look at the projections at JWB, you'll notice on wide receivers and at tight ends, you know, there's definitely top heavy. It drops off to that second and third tier, but the slope actually slows down. Mm-hmm. So your difference between your top of the 2nd tier and your bottom of the 3rd tier is way closer than the quarterback and the running back positions.
Correct.
So back to your point and to the strategy, I think if you can get your top guys in those positions, beautiful, like he did. But the rest of us that aren't going to get those top tier, I think you got to smash, just like we've been talking about, your quarterbacks and running backs, because you can then get your difference in your middle rounds between their first wide receiver. Like we'll talk about the later rounds, but when you get to those possession receivers in the 4th, 5th, 6th round, there's not a huge difference between that and on the wide receivers and the tight ends, say in the 3rd and 4th round. So I think the best value is to smash it if you're in position, but then if not, then get your quarterbacks and running backs, because those are going to be your biggest in the early rounds and also best floors as well.
And I think Travis Kelce is the biggest difference maker in this entire tournament. He's 50 points projected higher than Mark Andrews and 200 points higher than the tight end 13, okay? So if you get him week to week, I mean, that is an insane difference. John, one of the biggest pitfalls you and I talked about, and no pun intended because of Kyle Pitts, but Kyle Pitts is probably going to go ahead of Travis Kelce in multiple drafts here. In what you and I like to say, don't get that dynasty mentality. I talked about it in the group chat. I'm
You
the
gotta watch out
dynasty
for that.
dad, not the redraft dad. Sometimes I'm sitting there, I'm like, ooh, man, I don't have any Kyle Pitts shares. Kyle Pitts is more than likely not going to put anything close to what Travis Kelce does. Even though I still have him as a top, 4 or 5 tight end in this format, Travis Kelce is the GOAT when it comes to this kind of.
He really is. And I haven't ruled out. I mean, I might still have to take him at that 1-2 turn because he is such a difference maker. I mean, you're getting the equivalent of this is like an 11-week regular season. Imagine getting 3-4 points extra per your lineup every week that no one else can touch at that position. Here's my thing. I'm actually going to,
if you're going to the tight end 12, it's over 10
massive.
points a week. It's huge.
It's massive. And I actually am going to challenge the Twitter poll here. I really don't think you should wait on tight ends in Scott Fishbowl 12. I really don't. I might be in the minority, but it's one of the things I'm considering here because if you look at these projections, I was able to get Darren Waller at the 4-5 turn. Darren Waller is projected to outscore all wide receivers except for 2, Kupp and Jefferson. That's it. Yeah. In this format, you're getting not only the extra half point per reception, but you're getting another half point for first downs. So that's, you catch one pass that goes for a first down. That's an extra point than you're getting over wide receivers. And every single time that I'm looking at the board, I'm looking at my lineup, I know I need wide receivers. I've kind of been waiting on them, but it says draft a tight end every time in terms of points, the points you're putting on the board. And so I really think that that's something to consider. In fact, I ended up going back to Dalton Schultz, who they have here as the 5th overall tight end in the 7th round. And I mean, as soon as I was up, I was like, smash. I had to have that because
I wasn't happy. Adam and I were
either
talking.
Was I. No.
I was like, I'm taking Schultz. And then I think it's Kelce, Andrews, Waller, Pitts. They're going to go, maybe even Kittle. They're going to go early, okay? And we know that. And there's only about 5 guys who could be the tight end 1 overall, But what you got to do then, I mean, this is my 4th year. I've had Zach Ertz every year because I think Zach Ertz has been a value. He was a value in this particular draft, going in the, I believe, 8th round, but I really like Adam. I like your selection. I'm going to talk about mine real quick. I mean, in the 10th round, I got Cole Kmet, and in this, he's projected as a top 8 tight end.
That's nice.
And then you took Dawson Knox, who's projected as a top 12 tight end, and we got those a little bit later. So when we're saying wait, we're not saying wait till round 16 and take Evan Ingram. That's rough. That hurts because you want to have 2 tight ends. Roster construction is huge because it is 12 sharp guys in your league doing waivers. You can
start
every
up to
single
5,
week.
Dad. You can start 5 tight ends if you want to. I took another 3 later just because I felt like that might be a decent strategy to look for that in terms of roster construction. Get the most points in your lineup every week if you can, if it makes sense for the board.
Yeah, those mid-tier tight ends, just a reminder back to the first down and the completion of the tight end premium guys. You got to that's why I think smashing that middle tier. And I was both Waller and Schultz. I was talking to Dad John, and I was like, man, I don't think it's going to drop to me, but man, I really want those. But I ended up going with Knox. We'll talk about stacks here in a bit, but getting those guys in the middle rounds, and don't wait, because if you get a tight end 2 for your starter, that's, again, talking about the differences of a tight end 1 and tight end 2, especially in this format, is going to be huge. So you got to make sure you get one with that upside, but with the floor, with the possession receiver mentality.
Well, you mentioned stacks there, and I think we're here. We got to do it. We got to talk about it. In a normal dynasty, I don't care about stacks at all. I just want value because I'm making trades, doing things like that. In a redraft, I'm not super wild about it. But in this format, both of you guys love the stacks, and I get it. And I want you to talk to our listeners about it, especially because of this particular type of format where you need those points.
Yeah, I'll jump in and start on this, and I think Adam's kind of on the same page. I mean, when you think of huge leagues, a lot of the people stack in best ball for this reason, because you're competing versus a ton of different people. In this case, we got over 2,000 people in Scott Fishbowl, and you got that league median this year, and so when you think about how you're going to advance in the playoffs, it's like you're going to have to be better than a ton of different teams. And so those stacks can pay off, especially if you're in the right offense and they hit for that particular week. You just doubled up for, or maybe even tripled up, depending on the stack that you build, and just give yourself that kind of advantage. If the stars align, you could really end up with just a massive advantage that could end up advancing you in the playoffs in Scott Fishbowl. So that's the advantage. Now it can work against you in the other direction if that same stack kind of goes,
Well, you want
dark
to
there.
stack it with an elite quarterback like Adam did. So Adam has Josh Allen. He decided to stack with Dawson Knox. I'm not advocating stacking Jared Goff.
I did Dak and Dawson or Dalton Schultz was one I pulled together. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. Well, I would also. Oh, I'm sorry, John. Go ahead.
Well, no, go ahead. I have a few stacks that I was going to throw out there that are valued where you're not reaching for them that I'll throw in here in a second.
I was about to say that, John. That's the key, right? I think stacks are good in especially those positional roles where you have higher floors with that upside, but it's not forcing it. I think that's one of the biggest things I've seen, not only in mocks, but also just, I would say even in redraft normal leagues, right? Is people are taking a guy around early. So, for example, in my third and fourth round pick, I was seriously considering Waller there for that stack. But I felt at that position because then I would be really strongly positionally deficient in running back just with my build. So I knew I was considering there, but I knew that I wasn't going to reach for Waller and put myself in the deficiency in running back. So in those situations, I think you need to go for it, but you also need to not give up, those positional, completely shift your draft. So I think that's the one thing I want to caution before, John, you finish up with the stack, is just make sure you're not reaching for those stacks. But when they fall to you or they're within value, you got to smash them for sure.
Yeah, there's a few that I actually really like at value. We've been kind of chopping this up in the 12s, the dirty dozen here, that you could look for at my particular position. The Michael Pittman, Matt Ryan stack has actually been very affordable. You can see how late Matt Ryan went here.
And
Pittman,
Jared nailed that. I mean,
Jared did that. Yeah,
he went with 5,
really
6 Pittman Ryan, and that was real nice.
That's beautiful, right? Yeah, I wanted to call out Jared, give him a shout out there. That's something that I was kind of eyeing as well. Another one that I really like is Russell Wilson paired with Judy or Sutton, because Judy and Sutton are just going that much later. I was kind of eyeing to see how far they fell in here, but that looks like the 7th round for Judy, and Sutton was so in the 6th. So you could kind of wait and pair those guys up. I really think Denver could end up being pretty big. I mean, that one of those combinations, or maybe even all three of them, is pretty interesting and affordable. And then in Dallas, if you wanted to do like the Dak CD stack, that's going to cost you, right? I mean, I would have to do like my first and my 301, right? First, third, and I might even be lucky if CD's there. That to me is a little bit much, a little bit of a reach just to have the stack. So in my case, I paired Dalton Schultz with Dak later, and I think he could end up being really the number 2 target for Dak in that offense this year, and you're getting all those premiums. So that's another example. I didn't have to go again on that Dallas stack until the 7th in this case. So it's another one that I kind of like. Any others that you guys have thought about putting together?
I was gonna say real quick, I got Jared props again, because right after that in the Ryan pick, he did Pittman, Ryan, and then he did Bateman to go back with his Lamar Jackson.
Oh yeah,
so you're talking about that. So I think
that's
from
nice.
Stack's perspective, Jared did great value.
He nailed that
stack in there. Yeah.
And I was hoping to stack Sutton there, but I was like, in my position when I ended up taking my first wide receiver, McLaurin was on the board, and I feel like a little bit more upside. For me, the biggest thing, and the next thing I want to move on to is the running backs. I think the running backs are the quarterbacks and running backs are what win you the Scott Fish Bowl. Several years ago, I interviewed Stompy when he won it all, and he had Kamara as a rookie. He had Patrick Mahomes when he blew up. He had a lot of high upside like that. And the Twitter poll out there says 44% of you guys are going, robust RB. That's RBs early. 11% are doing 0 RB. No one's ever won the Scott Fish Bowl going 0 RB. 0 RB is just a myth. And then there's the weight on running backs. So for me, I'm robust. I'm about as robust as you can get every single year. I went Jonathan Taylor, then I went Russell Wilson. Then I love John. I love this 3rd round reversal where running backs, at least in our particular one, you got Derrick Henry at 1. I got Joe Mixon at 305 or 30. What is it? Yeah, 305. I was enamored because that's what I wanted. And then I'm like, okay, we're moving back the next way. I'm like, I'm not going to get another one of these stud running backs, And then all of a sudden, Leonard Fournette fell to me too. I'm like, if you can get one of these guys, You're going to get so much more there. I put that tweet out there from that viral video I absolutely love where I was like, yo, Jonathan Taylor, dog. I got Joe Mixon, dog. Dude, you got to get these running backs because running backs are going to what's going to win it for you. And my formula has always been running backs early. Then I've always done 3 wide receivers in a row. I try to really fill out that part of my position. I got McLaurin, Allen Robinson, and Amari Cooper. Arguably, but all those guys could be in that wide receiver 2 category. And then I think what you really got to do is you got to play some upside, right? Running backs are huge. You want to get those 3 starting wide receivers. You want to get those running backs, but then your lottery tickets are not roster clogging Tim Patrick wide receivers. They're, I took Kareem Hunt. So if Nick Chubb goes down, he's got standalone value, but he's there. I took Ramondre Stevenson, same thing. I do think he takes over there and he has standalone value, but if Damian Harris goes down, he could win leagues. James Robinson, again, an injury away. Gus Edwards, an injury away. I feel like you take some of those guys and you get those running backs. You don't want the back end of your bench to be a bunch of, young upside wide receivers who might not hit. You want running backs.
That's right.
Rookie running backs. I got to talk about the value. Breece Hall went in the 5th. Kenny Walker went in the 6th. There's always a rookie running back that's going to win it for you there, and you gotta get into that situation. I know people are going to say, well, Dad, I could draft my wide receivers and I could pick up running backs on the waiver. You are drafting with sharps. You're not drafting with, your 4 buddies from work and their girlfriends. You are drafting with guys. My particular division has 11 analysts and 1 fan. That guy's loving it so far, but these are sharp people. You are not going to be able to just claim these backup running backs. Running back, to me, is the most important position in this draft after quarterback.
Yeah, and I want to come back to a point here. Watch out for the ageism here, because so many of these people, I'm going to say 90% of these guys play Dynasty. But be careful here, because guys that shouldn't be available where they are in this format are I still
Javonte Williams over Leonard Fournette, things like that.
Don't do that. Well, no. Ezekiel Elliott is consistently available. In the 5th round, as another example. I don't think I should have been able to get Derrick Henry at the 3-1.
No.
From what he can do, I know he's coming off the injury, but I think he is going to beast this year. And getting him that late is a bargain. You getting Lenny Fournette
is a steal.
And is a steal. Had he fallen to me, I think I would have actually had the highest projection. That was very pivotal that you got that 3rd running back when you did.
That's huge, because I could have taken Debo. Right? I could have taken Tua there, but I got to give a shout out to I know he did it on purpose. But Fantasy Nerd Boy took Travis Etienne in the 5th. Etienne and Hall are going to smash in this format. I took Tua, but I was going to go 4 running backs and then hope to get Matt Ryan in that next round. That would have been absolutely massive. The other steal that you guys got to look out there for, I got Sam Eichenlaub somehow got Alvin Kamara in the 6th round. We're going to know a little bit more about the potential suspension, but bro, he might miss some time. He might not. And even if he does, he's coming back after weeks,
certainly for the playoffs.
For the playoffs for sure. And I think that's someone in there. Adam, who's some values here and some trends that you saw at the running back position? Because I know you got Chubb and Aaron Jones, and I love that. But let's talk about some of these other values that you saw drop, guys that we should be targeting.
Yeah, and I was citing between Chubb and Fournette. I knew I wanted Aaron Jones in that flip. So
it was really fun because I love this, because I was talking to John, not about any of your guys of who's coming up, and I was talking to you, and every time we were talking to each other, it was like, dang it, somebody took my guy. It was just a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I really Nerd Boy takes in the 7th round Miles Sanders. I thought was a huge value there. With I think we all love Hurts and think that they're going to pass more, but at the 7th round in this type of format, I thought that was a smash there. Great picks there. And then, you're really in your mid rounds, if you're trying to just build depth, I loved I loved the Stevenson pick. I love that from you. I also loved Singletary. It's not a sexy pick there, but in the late 9th round to get potentially in the best offense, and he scored a ton of touchdowns last year. And then they drafted Cook, who went right before him, ironically. But he's going to get more of the air yards, right? So I think that's a great floor pick. I think what what Jared was saying in his draft is that he, definitely, at least that's where I remember, is that he was, having Singletary as your RB2 is a little tough there, but certainly as a depth pick, I love having that as a flex. And
in a league like this,
yeah,
you have to have a deficiency somewhere,
right.
and I think that's the thing is like taking a running back with some upside then all of a sudden fills that deficiency, because if you have a Nick Chubb injury, now all of a sudden Kareem Hunt is an RB1 or RB2 as my fourth guy there, where you got to have your 3 wide receivers. You got to mix that in there. I know we're getting a little short on time, so I want to talk about wide receivers here. But for me, like I said, I like to wait a little bit on wide receivers. John, talk to me about the wide receivers you got. Yeah. And then some of the trends here, because you also waited for wide receiver. I mean, you went quarterback, running back, and then tight ends in there. You really went heavy on tight ends, but you were still able to get some value of guys that are, you got Mike Williams, who was wide receiver 13, Adam Thielen, who's criminally undervalued in a format like this, Robert Woods, Christian Kirk, and then upside of Jameson Williams.
Yeah, and again, like, you take advantage of the fact that a lot of these guys, and I love you guys, but some of these guys should not be available this late in redraft and in this scoring system. I chose guys that I think will score touchdowns. And, Adam Thielen, I mean, he was hurt last year. The guy still, I mean, people forget, still scored 10 plus touchdowns. Mike Williams is a threat to score every week. And with it being half point PPR, I'm okay with taking some guys that are later in their careers, but they're still balling out. They're going to get those first downs. They're going to get those touchdowns. So, that's why I pulled in a guy like Robert Woods. I think he could actually end up being the wide receiver 1 in Tennessee in year 1. I think it could take time for Burks to adjust to the NFL. And I think Woods can end up scoring touchdowns. So those are the kind of guys I was kind of waiting on and still snagging a little bit later. I will say, having to start 3 wide receivers back to that point, I may have waited a little bit too long, because it kind of dawned on me like, ooh, now I'm probably hurting with that wide receiver 3 slot on my starting lineup. And so that was one takeaway I had, that maybe I need to tweak that piece. But in general, I'm kind of a fan of waiting on wide receiver. And it looks like both of you kind of had a similar philosophy to some degree.
And Adam, I mean, if you look at rounds, like you were able to get Deontay Johnson in the 5th, Waddle in the 6th, London in the 8th, Burks in the 9th. But the major trend, if you look at this board, you see red at the top, you see green in that 3, 4, 5 range. 6 through 9 is predominantly wide receivers. And I feel like you guys are going to regret it if you do not take 3 or 4 in that range. Because you want those upside running back pieces, but you've got to have that floor of these wide receivers. And, I only took 3 there, and that's a minor regret of mine. I took 3 in a row, and then the only other wide receivers I was able to go with, I ended up taking, where's my board? My eyes are getting old, guys. I ended up going with Odell Beckham and Nico Collins on my last 2 picks, and I don't love that. I think Beckham's a guy that's going to come back late in the season. I ideally would have liked to take another one there. But again, it's interesting. You can see the board. It's almost color-coded, Adam.
Yeah, and that goes back to my earlier point about like the slope flattens, right, when you get to that second and third tiers of the wide receivers. So you have to take advantage of it by just loading up on those guys that are, again, good possession receivers, are going to get good solid volumes, but they do have upside. So that's where I loved getting London in the 8th. You're talking about a guy that might have 25+% target share. Same with Burks. And then Tyler Boyd in the 12th. I mean, you're talking to, so there's some great values even in the 12th, 10th, that mid-range, to your point. And then, the other thing I would say too is that's your time to try to lock in on those stacks, right, that we talked about. And then also trying to build, if you have like I did Pierce and Mack in the 11th and 13th. So if you can try to get, I don't want to say, more committee backs that have that upside, especially in an injury, though, that's the other part where you start seeing blue go back to green for some more running backs. So I just wanted to point that out as well.
And we got to look at some of these like recency bias. I mean, I was looking at, one of our DK Metcalf went in the 6th round to, who ended up taking him? That was, we'll look at that.
Dan Duke.
Yeah, Dan Duke. I mean, I thought that was good value. The 6, 7, 8 round. I mean, there's guys right now. If you look at this projection, you look at Brandon Cooks is wide receiver 13. You know, you have McLaurin in that area. You got Metcalf. You got Mooney. Mooney was a great value. I mean, these are all guys. Allen Robinson, I think, is going to be a wide receiver too. And heaven forbid, if Cooper Kupp goes down, Allen Robinson is going to eat like a maniac. Amari Cooper, everybody acts like because Deshaun Watson is going to miss some time that Amari Cooper's still not going to be a solid wide receiver. You either want a wide receiver 1 or 2 in an elite offense, or you want that number 1 target. Try to get those as many wide receivers as you can to get that, because you got to start 3. You know, you can't roll in there with just 3 guys. You got to end up doing that. We'd be remiss if we didn't talk about an important position there after that, John. Anything on the wide receivers before we move? I mean, there's value here all over the board, but we definitely want to keep it. Alan Lazard in the 10th round. You know, there's always a rookie that pans out. You know, I think that's something you want to play some upside. In round 7 through 11, you want to play that upside. You don't want to take.
I took J-Mo for upside.
Yeah. Like, there's some guys that you're just like, wow, that was a really boring pick, but you want to play some upside here. For me, I ended up taking the first kicker off the board. Kickers are important in Scott Fishbowl. I took Justin Tucker. Now, most leagues, every redraft I do, my kicker's my last pick. I don't care who he is. It's going to work. You know, in Scott Fishbowl scoring, Justin Tucker averaged 12.32 points per game. That is, you know, that's a back-end wide receiver 2 number.
Not bad.
So if you end up getting a kicker like that, they're not going to get hurt. You can plug them in your lineup for a flex play. And I think it is a strategy that people don't pay attention to. For the most part in our draft, you can see the purples all at the bottom. I went with Tucker there. You know, I think the other guys in that area, Butker, you know, McPherson, there's like Matt Gay, Tyler Bass. I mean, there's some guys that have some points. If they're going to put up 10, 12 points, I know it's not sexy. You're not going to brag about it. But in that range, you're getting a guy that is going to put up serious points. I took him over, you know, guys like Hunter Henry, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, George Pickens, Marlon Mack. Out of that list, who's going to score 12 points per game?
Yeah, that's
Justin Tucker's the only one right there. You know, so it's like, I know it doesn't sound sexy. It's not something you're going to brag to your friends about, but the kickers do matter. And this year, there is no more negative points for missed field goals. It's all positive from that end. Which
1 point each. Yep.
Yeah, and your quarterbacks are getting -4 for an interception. You know, fumbles are going to cost kickers. It's all positive, baby.
Yeah, and that's one thing I just want to point out with kickers and specifically to roster construction. So if you have a lot more upside plays in the early mid rounds, I would say preferring a kicker a little earlier than I would say, not early, but I'm just saying you probably want to prioritize a higher floor with the kicker because that'll help with your build. But, you know, I went with Bass myself kind of after that first run there, but I call it a stack, but it's not really a stack, but I kid. But, you know, overall it's really about adding floor, and floor is more important this year than previous years in Scott Fishbowl, like we were talking about earlier.
Good point.
So that's the other thing to consider here is just your roster construction. How much upside versus floor guys do you have? And a kicker can really add some floor in the flex spot, like Dad said.
Yeah. One piece of advice I'd throw out there on the kicker. I personally would not be the first guy to draft a kicker. What I've seen in multiple mock style is some guy goes out there and he gets Justin Tucker, and then like 2, if not 3 rounds go by. No one else has drafted a kicker yet. So, you know, you could have waited. Now, you don't want to get stuck and miss out on a run, but I mean, are we really going to see a kicker run in this thing? No, I think you could.
But I think I think there's a top 4 or 5 guys that are going to put up 10 to 12 points every week, which is nice. I want to give a shout out to the guys that participated in this. I mean, obviously both of you guys, but again, you know, Dan Brettweiser, you know, his favorite pick for him was Najee Harris in the 3rd round. Love that pick. Ended up getting, you know, he said his biggest regret was he would have gone quarterback heavy earlier knowing these things. And I think it's good to talk about what your takeaways are after the draft. Not just us, but listen to what they had to say. Pope FFH said, you know, for him, his favorite pick was in the 11th round getting Irv Smith, you know, and that's his area. He said for him, the draft strategy is it's quarterbacks early. You know, you got to get them. He took Joe Burrow and Trevor Lawrence. Cousin Vito, same thing. He wanted that top tier quarterback. He said his favorite pick was CeeDee Lamb at 310, because that's going to be a guy that he thinks is an upside wide receiver. Jared Selbraid, I know I always pronounce it wrong. That time I did it right. He said his biggest steal he thought was Javonte Williams in the 4th round, and then with top 5 upside. And then his favorite pick was Zach Ertz. Zach Ertz in the 8th round in this is, something that I think is very good value. Sam Eichenlaub, again, his favorite pick was Olave in the 10th and Kamara in the 6th. Both of those he thinks have some serious upside. Fantasy Nerd Boy, I'm tired of him being in my head, taking all my guys. But he said his biggest steal was Miles Sanders in the 7th. He was just, excited to be in it and wanted to get as much high-tier guys and get some handcuffs like I did. Austin, that's FF_prestige, said, for him, he doesn't mind Jameis Winston as the 9th, but his biggest regret there was, waiting too long on that. His biggest steal, he said, was Russell Gage in the 11th round as the 49th wide receiver off the board.
Pick.
I think that's a really good pick. Mung would be proud of him. Brian Russell, his problem is he took George Kittle. No, I'm just kidding. He said the biggest thing was for 3rd round reversal. He got, he was trying to figure out where to go when that 3rd round came back to him. He said he'd like to stay away from rookies, and the biggest thing was separating dynasty and redraft. In the Smash Accept Patreon, we do nothing but talk dynasty, and then we're like, oh, who do I take in, this is redraft again. Like, to me, I was having a hard time between Elijah Moore and Amari Cooper, but I'm like, it's redraft, it's not dynasty, So this has been a fun episode. I think we only started to touch the surface of Scott Fishbowl. But John, this will be is this your second or third? Second one.
Yeah.
So share a little bit more insight, and let's close this thing out with some parting thoughts.
Yeah, and look, I hope that everybody did have a few takeaways from this. I know for me, I'm kind of looking at what these projections laid out right in front of me, and I'm kind of thinking maybe you do go that robust running back like you did, 3 running backs in the first 4 or 5 picks.
It's worked, man.
I'm really thinking about it. I like leading with QB and running back. Again, I would advise don't wait too long on tight ends. Don't sleep on them too much. Watch out for that dynasty mindset. But coming back to the main thing I want to say is not only have fun, but do what you can to give back, right? I feel like we all have so much. One of the reasons, Dad, you and I are always trying to give back to the Fantasy Patreon, because that's what we do. But Scott Fishbowl gives us all a chance to do that. I decided this year for each win that I get, I'm going to give $12 to Fantasy Cares in honor of being the 12th year and being in the 12th slot in the order. And so, hopefully I'll win a few games here that I could give, but I'm looking kind of for other opportunities. Anybody can, it doesn't even matter if you're playing or not. It's a good opportunity to give back, help out some of these kids and a lot of other fantastic charities. So look for great opportunities to get involved and do your part.
Yeah, and Fantasy Cares is going to love that $12 you donate this year. Just $12 total, not per win. Now, Adam, this being your first experience, I'm interested to hear the whole way throughout. How you enjoy this, but
yeah.
Any parting shots on what we've been talking about, or anything you're super excited about?
Yeah, I'll just piggyback on the charity thing. I mean, it started with the Eliminators, right? I did a few of those. Got to jump in. Lionheart, if you guys look it up, is another. But there's going to be charities all over the place if you're on fantasy Twitter that are doing all good causes. It's just a good time to be a community, to build a community, and to build things that are good. So just find those opportunities, even if it's within Scott Fishbowl. I know, each of that's the other thing I don't know if everybody knows, but each of the actual 12 actual conferences are going to be something charity within each. So finding those opportunities is huge. And then just second, I'm really excited to just be the first year, but it's all about, building the community. So building the Patreon right with you guys, and it's sharing that experience. So I think charity and sharing the experience and fun are the top 2 things that I'm really looking forward to, and appreciate you guys letting me be on the pod as always.
Yeah. And I'm going to reach out to all the guys that did this and hopefully make this a league, just to have, we drafted it, put some charity in there. We've talked about doing our own Smash the Bowl and trying to raise some money. I mean, it's all about giving back. It's all about, Scott is a phenomenal human being, honestly, for setting this up and doing what he does. And it doesn't have to be, I know people say this all the time, but like I heard him say the other day, you know what, in your redraft league or your dynasty league, take 1 entry fee and donate it. You'd be surprised. We're in so many leagues. I mean, I'm in 15 leagues. If we donate $50 out of each one, into some form of charity. I mean, there's a lot of money to give back there. We're all so fortunate with what we do. You know, like it's a phenomenal experience, and I just want to encourage you guys to give back and enjoy the experience. Like, don't just. So many people that have been in this have messaged me, Dad, I don't know who to take here. I don't have fun. Just do it your way. You know what I mean? Like, let's get on the clock, have some fun with it. You know, you're not trading back. Just get in there and have some fun. If it was trades, I know people have asked that before. Like, if it was trades, it would take years, you know, but get in there, have some fun, make some connections, you know, and just enjoy the process just like you do on the podcast. So thanks again, guys, for tuning in. And honestly, we appreciate you guys. Have a good one. As always, oh man, this ain't closing. This is going to be a boomer moment.